Yeah. Just my take on things. My answer to number 2. Guided discovery. Identifying, challenging your beliefs. Reframing your mind, negative thoughts release. Those cognitive distortions decrease.
All right. Welcome to another exciting episode of Peplau's Ghost. I am joined with my usual crew of Kendra, Sean, Kate, and Melissa. And it is my thrilling excitement to introduce my second guest here. Dr. Cynthia Handrup was our guest last episode, but we've got a new exciting guest, Dr. Kathleen Wheeler, who I've got a quick bio to kind of review as well. But super excited to have everybody here on the pod. Thank you so much for listening. Excited to kind of get right into it here. So Dr. Kate Wheeler, to give a quick bio, she is most recently taught at Fairfield University. I believe she is moving into retirement as we speak. According to her bio, she has developed one of the first PMHNP programs at Fairfield University that started in 1994. She was the first chair of the NOMF PMHNP SIG, which is really cool, started that whole thing. The biggest thing, though, she is the author of Psychotherapy for Advanced Practice Psych Nurse. And so it is in its third and currently being updated. And it did win the American Journal of Nursing Book Awards in 2015 and 2018. So amazing, amazing work. And I think that's really what brings Kate Wheeler here to our pod to talk about psychotherapy and her expertise in doing this, publishing and writing about it. She's also a fellow in the American Academy of Nursing, has won multiple awards at the American Psychiatric Nurse Association, to include the Media Award, the Excellence in Practice, and Excellence in Education Award. So really pleased. Thank you so much. In my ears, I'm hearing a round of applause. So thank you, Kate, for joining us on this pod. We've got some questions we'd like to kind of ask you and kind of go around the room a little bit. But I think one of the things that I like to kind of start off with is asking you maybe kind of a left field kind of question. Do you remember, just for myself, do you remember the first time you and I met, Kate?
The first time? It's been a number of years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was it at that? Yeah. I think that.
It was. Well, and maybe it was, but my first recollection of meeting you is I gave a presentation. I was like super new I was probably 2015, 2016. I had only heard your name, of course, and used your textbook in our program. And I gave a talk on psychotherapy education at NOMF. And you asked a question, and it's a question that I keep thinking about, and we can talk more about this too. But you asked the question, should PMHNP programs teach one form of psychotherapy, or should they teach multiple forms of psychotherapy? So should it be very specific, or should it be more broad? Which was a great question to ask, but I've always kind of remembered that, and it's been an honor to kind of work with you and continue to know you all these years later. So yeah, one of those things.
The same question.
I think we all do, right? I mean, we all struggle with that. It's does every program kind of have their own niche, and is there CBT programs, psychoanalysis programs, or do we just teach broadband? So maybe we can kind of get into that a little more. I'll get back on script and say, first question I have for you is, when did you first get interested in psychotherapy? What initially drew you to psychotherapy?
Well, I worked for 10 years in ICUs, and then I was a 2-year associate degree nurse, and then I went back to school and got a degree at Cornell while I was working New York Hospital. And then my roommate was at NYU telling me all these weird things about nursing. So I went down there. It was so fun. So really opened my eyes. Took some psych. They had a big focus on psych courses. So I really got interested in that way. And then when I graduated with my master's, I wanted to learn more, but I didn't at all think I could do psychotherapy. So I went to an analytic training program and continued to get a PhD in nursing from NYU while I was in analytic training. So that was, for me, a 5-year program, because you had to have a case that you treated with psychoanalysis. You had to be in your own analysis, coursework at night. It was very psychodynamic, Freudian kind of. There wasn't any other nurse in it. So it was just so fun and eye-opening. A lot of supervision, and you saw 10 hours a week of their patients. So by the time I got finished with that, I got brave enough to get a practice in New York in, okay, what year was that? I don't know, 20 years ago. It was a long time ago. So, yeah, so I know the power, I think the power of consultation and supervision is really important for everybody. And, I still have colleagues that I rely on and talk to. I'm getting consultation now from a colleague that's doing a lot of work with attachment and a specific protocol in EMDR that I took the training, or it's not a training, it was a workshop a while back, and tried it once maybe and just didn't think it was going to work. But she's doing these things. She's a psych MP. She calls intensives. And so she gets referrals from people, colleagues, for patients with attachment disorders. And she sees the person, for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours a day, like 3 days a week. And then she sends them back to the therapist. And she's like saying how powerful this is, how the therapists are so grateful the patient is. So anyhow, it's kind of exciting because that's what really draws me, I think, to psychotherapy. There's always new stuff to learn, and you can never learn it all. And the more you know, I think you can help more people because one thing doesn't just work for everybody. So, I'm still excited about continuing to learn. And at first trained as a psychoanalyst, I don't know, maybe I wasn't very good at it, but it just seemed like, okay, what am I supposed to say? And, trying to time the intervention to where the person was. And then I learned EMDR. I was like, wow, this is so amazing because the patient is the one that figures it out. You just facilitate their brain going where it needs to go. And so the power of it really, and it's so much faster than what I was doing. So now I'm trained. Well, I'm doing a training right now. This might be my last training virtually, a trainer in EMDR. And my goal originally was this would be such a perfect thing for all psych MPs to add to their practice because, it's scripted and it's very doable for a lot of different problems. It's not just for PTSD. It's because most things are about bad stuff that's happened to us. And so it could be coming out, any anxiety disorder, depression, whatever it is. So that was sort of my original zeal about teaching. I made my student, I started the Psych MP program and was part of a course that they had to take. It was EMDR training, EMDR. Some of them, really got into it. Others, I think didn't. And it's kind of an interesting experience to force your students to take trauma training when they don't want to. But they did it because they wanted to get through the program. And a lot of them later, said that even if they're in a situation, most of the jobs are prescribing that they get when they graduate. But, they refer patients. And I think it's a way of thinking, a trauma-informed way of thinking that really helps with case conceptualization, no matter what you're doing. So that's kind of a long-winded how I got interested. I always interested, in thinking that in the ICU, it didn't matter if I was a robot. You just wind up and go check tubes and did that for so long. And I thought, oh, there's got to be more to nursing. I want to interact and make a difference, like who I am, make a difference to who they are. So with psychotherapy, I really felt the draw and the power of it. And having experienced, the psychoanalytic training where you're in psychoanalysis, that was very interesting. And I hadn't really had much therapy or anything before that. So, was very intrigued by the power of the relationship. So when I started the program at Fairfield U, I really, there was like Heinz 57 Psych MP programs. Some people thought, oh, the Psych MP is like an FMP, but they just do physicals on psych patients. And so there were some programs like that. And then there was some programs that, were saying that, that they were very not teaching psychotherapy. And at that time, there was just, clinical nurse specialists, which is what I was. And there wasn't a psych MP. And so I started that program because HRSA had money for psych MPs. For MPs. And the other program, the FMPs were getting all this money from the government. I thought, well, I'll just say this is a psych MP. I just came up with it. I didn't know anything. But anyhow, that's how that program got started. And then NOP decided, the first meeting I ever went to at NOP, they had already developed, adult nurse practitioner and other family nurse practitioner competencies. And so they said, oh, well, we want all you psych people to get in a room and talk to each other. So there was, I don't know, maybe 10 of us. And we passed around a piece of paper and got everybody's name. And we didn't know what we were doing. But at the end of this meeting, I was the last one that had the piece of paper. So I take it up to the director and she goes, oh, are you the chair? I said, we didn't know we were supposed to have a chair. She goes, oh, you can be the chair. So I'm like, okay. And then 2 weeks later, they call me up and they say, oh, well, we got some funding and we're going to develop psych MP competencies. So they wanted me to be, ahead of that or, the lead person. And so they put that in their newsletter. And a friend of mine, Judy Haber at NYU, she wrote a text many moons ago for psych. She and I had gone to NYU's program together. She called me and she goes, I can't believe you're the chair. I should be the chair. Because she had published. She was like a big deal. And I was sort of nothing. I said, well, let's do it together. So we did it together. I was really grateful to her, though, because she's very politically savvy and a smart lady. And so it was just fun because there was all the old CNSs developing what we wanted psych MPs to be. And we spent a weekend cranking it out at NYU and came up with, how to merge the traditional psychotherapy, we called it, the fourth P, with the other roles that nurse practitioners do. So that was kind of an exciting time because then they sent these competencies around to get endorsed by various groups, the addictions nurses and ISPN and, APNA and everybody. So that's kind of how the first competencies came about. So we were happy that we weren't losing that role because that was what was really important to us as CNSs. So, yeah, I'm like,
thanks.
Happy here.
No, you're good. I'm always surprised. I'm always interested too. I try to put myself in a situation like that where I'm the only nurse, like you said, in that psychoanalysis course, or you're just kind of thrown into the deep end and just like, here you go and good luck. And I think, collaboration always works well there, but I still think that it takes such courage. So thanks for sharing that. Sean, I think that's your next question. So.
Yeah, Kate, I'm grateful for the opportunity to ask this question. Dan's first question kind of had you an opportunity to kind of talk about the academic experiences. My question is going to be really focused clinically. So can you think about a particular psychotherapeutic experience you are a part of that best represents your passion that you bring to your craft?
You mean like a specific thing with the patient?
Yes.
Well, the first patient I had, I remember at the Analytic Institute, came in. And she was this little Italian girl, and she was suicidal. And I was, I had been in so many life and death situations in the ICU, but this just like put the fear of God in me to have that responsibility because there wasn't a lot of people around, it was just me and this woman in this room, and I had to figure out what to do with her. So it was just such a, like in the hospital, you have such good support. It's like, you don't have to know. I mean, you have to know something, but, you're not ultimately it. And so anyhow, I remember saying to this girl, okay, I'll be back in a minute. And I ran out to try to find, it was in the Analytic Institute where the office was, to find somebody to help me. And it ended up where we called the girl's mother, and, the mother reassured us she was going to watch her and make sure she came back for her next appointment. But it was the very first time, that I had somebody one-on-one. And so it was just, I thought, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. And then I remember, reading, the Wahlberg was the big book at the time, which was quite a tomb to get through. But like, I was so anxious about doing therapy. And, it was like, I don't know, I think most students feel the same way. I mean, we've been talking to patients for years, but there's just something about, I don't know if it's the responsibility. I was afraid I'd say the wrong thing. And then I decided, well, let me just try to get them to talk. Don't worry about what I'm going to say. And that seemed to go much better, if I just focused on, their story. And I just always found people's stories so interesting. I just never got bored, never, thought, why am I doing this? So it's just been, I really found my ideal, I think, with doing therapy. So I have a private practice out of my home and, maybe see 12 or 15 patients a week, but no more than that. So it's still, a passion. I love teaching it, although I'm not teaching it right now. So.
Well, I appreciate you speaking about the experience of imposter syndrome on the front end of this early on in your career. What would you say to like the next generation of students that are coming behind who are experiencing the same thing that you are right now as they're listening to this podcast?
Do you mean the students that are really anxious about doing therapy? Yes, I think getting good consultation and supervision, it really gives you the confidence. And whether it's, I don't know if you want to do a whole analytic program, but there's plenty of, I think everybody sort of gravitates towards the kind of therapy, that makes sense to them. So back to Dan's original thing, what he was saying, I kind of favored nurses taking a stand and saying, okay, this is what we need to know, because the psychiatrists did that. They, have the Y model. They say you have to know psychodynamic, you have to know CBT. And I think that having prescriptive therapies that are evidence-based, that are in the programs, strengthens who we are, and would, because the psych MPs are getting referred patients, and I think the consumer or the public thinks that they know how to do therapy. And I've talked to so many people that, about contributing to my book or whatever, and they say well, I'd like to, but we never got psychotherapy in our program. I'm like, what? How could that be? So I think there's so many people, psych MPs, that need to know it, that don't know it. And probably part of that's a result of, faculty having, it's like one more thing you got to know. You already have to do the academic piece and publish and do all this. And now you think I'm going to do a psychotherapy program? It's so unrealistic to put us in that position. So I try to get my students, telling them that this is just, they're not going to learn everything in this program, that it's just the beginning and then they'll find their thing, but they need to keep going to school if they're going to do a good job out there. And when they get tired of writing scripts, which they will, I think at first they're like thinking it's so cool, they can do that. But, I think there's a big burnout after a certain amount of time. And then they want to do something, very meaningful.
You're not in agreement on that. Thank you. Kendra?
Yeah, you just said, you always tell your students that, you're going to find your thing. And I think a question I know I get a lot of times from my students is like, how did you find your thing? Like, how do I know it's my thing? Like, what would you say to students or, practicing psych NPs about how to find that therapeutic modality that resonates with them? Like, how did you find yours, and, how might they find theirs?
I think I encourage, them to get, to go to talks, and that getting your psych NP really opens a whole world to you that they don't know anything about, but now they can take CBT, they can take, psychodynamic training, the EMDR. There's so many different modalities, and they're not going to learn much in depth in the program. Even, like my students, I made them do the EMDR training. Probably, a handful of them at most really went on and decided that was the thing they wanted to focus on. And so then they got more education. So I think just by sticking your toe in the water, and you can get, some of that through APNA or ISPN, or, they could go to CBT program. It opens up a whole new world that I think that they're not even expecting. So I just think, continuing to learn. And if you have a role model or somebody, and getting into, after I got EMDR trained, I was in supervision with this lady for probably 10 years. She was up in New Haven, and she was a social worker, but she kind of helped me figure out like how to frame. I had to read stuff I was writing for my book for the first edition, because I taught this course in the summer, making students read all the psychotherapy stuff. There wasn't anything that nursing had that helped, and the students were ready to throw the books at me, because I make them do so much. Because how do you teach it? Do you know what I mean? In a course. So then I thought, well, let me just take, all the stuff I think that they should know, and I put it in this book. And so that made it more user-friendly to do that. And so over the course of different iterations of the text, it's helped me to kind of refine my thinking about the need for kind of a model or a framework for practice. And what does that look like? And basing it on, neurophysiology, on Porges, on Shapiro's adaptive information processing, and calling it, like the last edition, I didn't call it anything. Kathy Delaney says, well, you should give that a name. So I said, okay, what about resilience relationship model? Because that's kind of how I see it. And I try to, explain it like that. So I think if students have a model, they can look through a trauma-informed lens and see the patient's problems as, not like a diagnosis or what's wrong with them, but what happened to them. It makes they'll be more empathic, first of all, and it really changes the whole way that you work with somebody. So sort of pushing that model now. I had an opportunity to talk up at Columbia University. It was a few months ago, to do this keynote. And I figured out how to put all this into an hour talk not everything I'm saying now, but I mean about the framework. And I used this case to illustrate, and I worked so hard on that. It was like my brain hurt trying to do it because I wanted to make it user friendly and, get them interested, not just have this dry, boring thing. So it really ended up to be fun. I thought it was fun, and I got, good feedback on it. So I think it can be, if we build on what Peplau started. Peplau, her ghost is hanging, because that's what nurses, I think, are hungry for, and why we all went into nursing is relationship. And you get so far away from that, and it's like, you think, what am I doing, which is what, when I go make site visits with my students, usually there's a student might be at the computer, doing something. And then there's their preceptor sitting next to them. And, it's just so not what you want for today's world, is how, it's not psychotherapy. It's like, well, let me get these outcomes and chart and see you kind of thing. So we've got, the system, trying to work the system so it's conducive to what we want to do seems to be kind of the challenge.
I love the way that you talk about relationships, and like in hearing the way that, your heart not only for relationships with like our patients, but I'm also hearing a lot, even what you're saying of like interprofessional relationships, whether that's like our colleagues within nursing, but also to hear you talking about our colleagues in social work and all the different, individuals that we can be reaching out to who have different expertises and lived experiences that I think can have such rich insight for us and our field as we're figuring out, what areas resonate with us too, with this common undercurrent of that trauma-informed care that you're talking about.
We have a lot of power, people trust nurses and that, they think you know what you're doing. And I was afraid, like when I first started doing therapy, like maybe they'd say, oh, you're a nurse, like, what am I doing here? Then nobody was like that. They were like so relieved, I think, that I was a nurse, that it really made me feel good, and kind of surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Dr. Wheeler, you kind of led me right into my question for you, which is, you are clearly someone who has put so much time, energy, effort into, I'll say building the case for nurses being psychotherapists as well. For those administrators or other clinical leaders or even students who are sort of skeptical about our role as psychotherapists, what would you say to them in terms of nursing's potential for leadership in providing psychotherapy?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I feel like there's always a surprise, like in clinical placements, they have the PsychNP kind of siloed, over here. Well, they don't do the therapy. I understand the economics of it. They can hire social workers for less money, but, it's kind of a battle, to, first of all, educate the agency. No, actually, psych MPs can do therapy, and they need to have, sometimes they'll place the person, like they'll say, well, our psych MPs don't do therapy. And so I have to put the student with the social worker. But, it's kind of an ongoing tension between what the agency thinks is cost effective and what we want, for our students. And so I'll kind of try to work the system the best way I can to get the students the experience that we required so many hours of psychotherapy in our program. And I mean, it wasn't very rigid, but, we had so many hours of group, so many hours of individual, and then, medication management. And those medication management were the easiest ones to get. It was the other ones that, it was like pulling teeth sometimes at the agencies to get them to agree. And I think it's just us educating people and, trying to, like the students here in Connecticut, there's a big need for psych MPs. And so, I encourage them to kind of try to carve out what they want when they go for these interviews. Like how many patients do you want to see, for intakes, or for what's your max in terms of med management? And do you want 20, 30 minutes for that session and then have so many other sessions where there's psychotherapy? And, I think it's up to like us, the faculty, to kind of, educate the agency, educate the students, make sure that everybody understands this is a crucial role. Because if we lose that role, first of all, they were students, graduates of psych MP programs get referred patients, and the public thinks they know how to do therapy. And it's not just, and sometimes the psych MP thinks they know how to do therapy, even though they don't. They've never had a course or anything. They just, I don't know why they think that. I guess because they've been talking to patients for years. They think that's it. So I think, that's why I kind of advocate if we could get our act together and say, okay, everybody has to know CBT and supportive psychodynamic, end of story. Or interpersonal. Have one or two things, that we required. It would just sort of strengthen this whole thing. Instead of somebody saying, oh, but I really like existential and I really like Gestalt. If you have like Heinz 57 in all the programs, it just seems like it impacts the quality of the programs. And I have my bias, the ones I like, but, it should be something that most people kind of have a consensus about.
This is another perfect transition into our last question. Dr.
How do you
Wheeler.
guys feel about it? Yeah.
Well, I don't know if others want to weigh in, but we would love to hear what the future of psychotherapy for PMHNP is, in your opinion. We've talked about such a variety of topics. Within that, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the future of psychotherapy for this field.
On the future? I'm hoping it continues to be emphasized. And I think it's up to a small cadre like yourselves to make that happen. And I've seen I'm kind of at the end of my career here, but, I've seen it grow and take more prominence over the years now than it did at the very beginning. At the very beginning, it was really hard to emphasize it. And then once we solidified the competencies and the CCNE people said, okay, you're not going to get accredited unless you follow NOP competencies. We're like, yes, we got it now. And I mean, it's kind of not really true, because anytime we had accreditors come, they were never psych MPs. And they'd say, well, do you do psychoeducation? I'm like, yeah, we do that. But the questions, were kind of lame. They were not really knowledgeable about how to find out if the program was really teaching psychotherapy. So I think there needs to be more teeth in it, and it seems like the NOP competencies now. Dan knows how we feel about this. It's like an MP is an MP is an MP. It's not, and that's the way NOP is going. And are they going to now have as much teeth into the idea that you need to know psychotherapy? I think NOP is very powerful. So I think everybody needs to go and make your noise and be in the psych sig and try to promote what we do. because I think they're the movers and shakers of the MP world. And we're kind of like, hanging on over here out in left field with all the other MPs or, marching in sync is kind of what I feel. And we've always been like the outliers, which, it's been a small group. I think they've gotten much stronger over the years, which I think Dan can attest to, right? You're still hanging in there.
Yeah. No, I love this idea that, a lot of MPs are kind of marching to kind of a solid drum. And then I've always found PMHNPs, they have to be, I'll say courageous in their own way, but they also have to be a little ODD, a little oppositional defiant. They just have to kind of think a little differently because they have to fight upstream sometime with these sort of issues. And again, I think that's, what brings us all together here. And I want to really take a moment, just say thank you so much to Dr. Kate Wheeler for sharing your expertise and your passion here. Half hour is not enough time. Maybe we'll have you come back for a part 2. And so to continue having this conversation, but really excited about this. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone listening to Peplau's Ghost. Really appreciate that. Please like, subscribe, and comment. And thank you again, Dr. Kate Wheeler. And thank you, Dr. Sean Convoy, Dr. Kendra Delaney, Dr. Kate Molino, and Dr. Melissa Chapman. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward to hearing another episode soon. So
thanks a lot. It's fun. Bye.
Fallacies, either the helpless or they assume responsibility. Personalization over generalization. Global labeling, emotional reasoning. Too much thought like this, too much seasoning. They feel it, therefore it's true. Work hard until those thoughts are finally leaving, so you can be you. They feel it, therefore it's true. Work hard until those thoughts are finally leaving, so you can be you. Guided discovery. Identifying, challenging your beliefs. Reframing your mind, negative thoughts release. Let it go. These cognitive distortions decrease until they cease. Yeah, guided discovery. Identifying, challenging your beliefs. Reframing your mind, negative thoughts release. Let it go. These cognitive distortions decrease until they cease.